The Hindu Kush mountains rose like jagged teeth against the midnight sky, their peaks lost in gathering storm clouds. Captain Marcus Chen studied the terrain through night vision goggles, his breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. SEAL Team 7 had been moving through these treacherous passes for 6 hours, their target just 3 kilometers ahead, an abandoned Soviet outpost where intelligence indicated a major weapons transfer would occur before dawn. "Hold position," Chen whispered into his comm. Behind him, 7 operators froze mid-step, becoming one with the shadows. Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison moved up beside his commander, scanning the narrow canyon ahead with practiced eyes. "Doesn't feel right, sir," Morrison muttered. "Too quiet. Where are the sentries?" Chen felt it too, that sixth sense combat veterans develop, the instinct that separates the living from the dead. The canyon was a perfect ambush site, walls rising 60 feet on both sides, only one way forward and one way back. Intel had promised a lightly guarded transfer site. This felt like a trap. "Lieutenant Park, take Santos and Rodriguez. Scout the left ridge," Chen ordered. "Stay off comms unless you see something. Wheel." The night exploded. Muzzle flashes erupted from 3 sides simultaneously, a coordinated killing field. The distinctive crack of AK-47s mixed with heavier machine gun fire. Tracers cut through the darkness like deadly fireflies. This wasn't random insurgent fire. This was military precision, overlapping fields of fire, professionally executed. "Ambush, get to cover." Chen's voice cut through the chaos as his team scattered, training overriding panic. He grabbed Santos, the youngest operator, pulling him toward a cluster of boulders as bullets chewed up the ground where they'd been standing. Morrison rolled behind a rock outcropping, returning fire in controlled bursts. "We're pinned. At least 20 hostiles, multiple positions." Through his night vision, he saw figures moving with tactical discipline, not insurgents but trained soldiers. Then came the shot that changed everything. The sniper's bullet entered Captain Chen's chest just below his body armor, a perfect shot through a gap no amateur could exploit. Chen gasped, stumbled, and fell. Morrison saw it happen in slow motion, saw his commander, his friend, collapse into the sand. "Captain down, Captain down." Morrison crawled through incoming fire, reached Chen, and rolled him over. Blood poured from the wound, black in the green glow of night vision. Morrison pressed his hands against it, trying to stop the flood, but he'd seen enough battlefield injuries to know. The bullet had found Chen's heart. "Marcus, stay with me," Morrison urged, but Chen's eyes were already glazing over. With his last breath, Chen grabbed Morrison's vest, pulled him close, and whispered, "Get them. Home." Then he was gone. "The captain's dead," Morrison said into the comm, his voice hollow with disbelief. Around him, the firefight intensified. Rodriguez took a round in the leg. Park was pinned down, unable to reach them. The enemy knew exactly where they were, and that sniper was hunting them with systematic efficiency. "We need to move now," Morrison shouted. "Fighting retreat to those ruins 200 meters northeast. Move in pairs, covering fire." The SEALs executed the maneuver with desperate precision, dragging their wounded, laying, suppressing fire. Morrison grabbed Chen's body, refusing to leave him behind. They stumbled into the remains of ancient stone structures, some forgotten outpost from centuries past, as the storm finally broke overhead. Lightning illuminated the battlefield in strobing flashes. Rain hammered down, turning dust to mud. Morrison counted heads, 7 men left, 2 wounded, ammunition running low. They were 40 miles from the nearest extraction point, surrounded by an enemy force that fought like special operations soldiers. "Who are these guys?" Lieutenant Park gasped, binding Rodriguez's leg wound. "This isn't Taliban, this is professional." "Mercenaries," Morrison replied grimly. "We've been set up." He tried the radio, got only static. The storm was blocking satellite communications. They were alone. Another SEAL, Petty Officer Chen, no relation to the captain, screamed and went down. The enemy sniper had found him. Through the rain and darkness, Morrison could barely see the shooter's position, somewhere on the high ridge 800 meters out. Impossible range in these conditions, yet the shooter was hitting targets with terrifying accuracy. "We're in a kill box," Morrison said quietly, accepting their situation. 7 men, dwindling ammunition, no communications, no extraction coming. The enemy would wait out the storm, then finish them at dawn. Then he saw it through his night vision, a lone figure moving along the ridgeline above and behind the enemy sniper's position, moving with a grace that seemed almost supernatural, flowing from cover to cover like smoke. Morrison's breath caught. No one moved like that. No one except. A single shot cracked through the storm. The enemy sniper jerked once and fell silent. Morrison's blood turned to ice. That shot, 200 meters in a storm, hitting a target most shooters couldn't see. He knew only one person in the world capable of making it. But that person was dead. Lieutenant Sarah Winters had died in these mountains 3 years ago. Hadn't she? For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The enemy mercenaries held their positions, waiting for their sniper to report. When no response came, confusion rippled through their ranks. Morrison watched through his scope as flashlights appeared on the ridge where their sniper had been positioned, voices shouting in Russian. Then the ghost went to work. Another shot echoed across the canyon, and a mercenary's flashlight tumbled down the mountainside, the man behind it already dead. The remaining enemies killed their lights immediately, but it was too late. A third shot, a fourth. Each one came from a different position, creating the illusion of multiple shooters surrounding them. Morrison had seen this tactic before, psychological warfare designed to break an enemy's nerve. Sarah Winters had perfected it in Afghanistan, becoming a legend among insurgents who called her the demon who shoots from nowhere. The mercenary force, suddenly vulnerable and leaderless, began a tactical retreat. Not a panicked rout, these were professionals, but a calculated withdrawal from an untenable position. Whoever was hunting them had turned their ambush into a death trap. "Chief, what's happening?" Park asked, reloading his rifle with trembling hands. "Someone's covering us," Morrison replied, not ready to voice the impossible thought forming in his mind. "Everyone stay down, let them go." The firefight ended as quickly as it had begun. The mercenaries melted into the darkness, dragging their dead with them, leaving SEAL Team 7 alone in the ruins with the storm and their fallen captain. Morrison posted guards and waited, watching the ridgeline where the mysterious sniper had last fired from. Dawn came slowly, the storm passing into angry gray clouds. As pale light spread across the mountains, a figure appeared at the edge of the ruins. She moved cautiously, weapon ready, scanning for threats with the paranoid wariness of someone who'd survived too long in enemy territory. Morrison stood slowly, his rifle lowered but ready. The woman was lean to the point of gauntness, her tactical gear a patchwork of mismatched equipment, Russian body armor over American fatigues, a ghillie suit that looked hand-woven from local vegetation. Her face was weathered, scarred, harder than the mountains themselves. But the eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes that missed nothing, he'd know them anywhere. "Lieutenant Winters," his voice cracked on the name. She stopped 10 feet away, her custom M40A6 sniper rifle still gripped tight, as if she'd forgotten how to let it go. For a moment, she didn't respond, just stared at him like she couldn't quite believe he was real. "Chief Morrison," she finally said, her voice rough and unused to conversation. "Been a while." The other SEALs emerged from cover, staring in shock. Santos, who'd been fresh out of training when Winters died, looked like he was seeing a ghost. Park actually took a step backward. These men had attended her memorial service, had saluted an empty coffin draped in an American flag. "You're dead," Park stammered. 3 years ago, Operation Silent Thunder, your whole team was wiped out. We buried you." "You buried an empty box," Sarah replied flatly. She lowered her rifle finally, and Morrison saw the scars on her hands, burn marks, knife wounds, signs of torture that made his jaw clench. The mission was compromised before we inserted. Ambushed 6 hours in. My team was slaughtered. I was captured. The words fell like stones into water. Morrison moved closer, studying her face. The Sarah Winters he remembered had been confident, almost cocky, with a quick laugh and an easy smile. This woman was a weapon that had been sharpened on mountains and pain until nothing soft remained. "Captured by who?" Morrison demanded. "Colonel Dmitry Volkov, former Spetsnaz, now the most successful arms dealer in Central Asia." Sarah's eyes hardened. "He runs a mercenary army, sells weapons to the highest bidder, those men who ambushed you, his private soldiers. He wanted SEAL tactics, intelligence, operational details. Kept me in a black site for 8 months. "Jesus Christ," Santos breathed. "How did you escape?" Sarah's smile was cold and terrible. "I killed 6 guards, stole weapons, and disappeared into these mountains. That was 8 months ago. I've been surviving, watching, gathering intelligence. Couldn't risk making contact because Volkov has someone inside JSOC feeding him information. That's how he knew about my mission. That's probably how he knew about yours." Morrison felt the ground shift beneath his feet. A mole in Joint Special Operations Command. It explained the perfect ambush, the professional enemy force. "You have proof?" "I have surveillance photos, documents, radio intercepts, 8 months' worth of intelligence." Sarah pulled a weathered camera from her pack, started showing them images on the display screen. Weapons stockpiles, Chinese surface-to-air missiles, anti-tank systems, chemical weapon components. And in one chilling photograph, a reinforced container marked with Cyrillic radiation warnings. "Volkov's here now, overseeing the biggest transfer I've seen," Sarah continued. "Buyers arrive at dawn tomorrow at his compound 30 miles northeast. If they complete this deal, those weapons kill thousands of American soldiers and civilians. Maybe more." Morrison studied the photos, his tactical mind already calculating. "We need to extract, report this through proper channels, get a task force." "No," Sarah's interruption was sharp. "You report this, the JSOC mole tips off Volkov within hours. He disappears and we lose the only chance to stop him and expose the traitor." She locked eyes with Morrison. "I've been hunting this bastard for 3 years. I know his compound, his defenses, his routines. I need a team. Your team. We hit him today, destroy the weapons, capture Volkov, and get the evidence that proves someone in our command sold us out." "You're asking us to go rogue," Park interjected. "Disobey extraction orders, conduct an unauthorized mission in a foreign country based on intelligence from a presumed dead operative who's been off-grid for 3 years. That's a court-martial. That's prison time." "That's right," Sarah agreed without hesitation. "I'm asking you to throw away your careers, maybe your freedom to do what's right instead of what's easy." She looked at Captain Chen's body, covered with a poncho. "I heard the radio chatter. You lost your commander, I'm sorry. Marcus Chen was a good man, one of the best. But he taught all of us one thing. SEALs don't leave anyone behind, and we don't let our brothers die for nothing." Morrison stared at the photographs, then at his captain's body, then at the mountains that had held Sarah Winters prisoner for 3 years. The protocol was clear. Extract, report, let the chain of command handle it. But protocol had gotten Chen killed. Protocol had left Sarah to die alone in these mountains. Protocol was protecting a traitor who'd sold out American lives for money. "How many hostiles at the compound?" Morrison asked quietly. Sarah's eyes flashed with grim satisfaction. She'd known he would ask. "Approximately 40 mercenaries. Heavy weapons, armored vehicles, fortified positions. We're looking at 6 operators with limited ammunition against a hardened target. It's a suicide mission, Chief." Morrison looked at his team. Santos, barely old enough to buy beer, nodded immediately. Park hesitated, then squared his shoulders and nodded too. One by one, every SEAL gave their silent assent. Then we better make one hell of a plan, Morrison said. We've got 18 hours. Winters, brief us on everything: terrain, defenses, guard rotations, the works. He held out his hand to her. Welcome back to the team, Lieutenant. Sarah gripped his hand, and for the first time since she'd appeared, something almost like hope flickered in her eyes. She wasn't alone anymore. After 3 years of surviving in the darkness, fighting a private war against an enemy no one else could see, she finally had her brothers beside her again. Let's go kill a devil, she said. Morrison called the team meeting in the center of the ruins, where ancient stone walls provided cover from observation and the wind. Captain Chen's body lay nearby, wrapped in a poncho, a silent witness to the decision they were about to make. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across men who stood at a crossroads between duty and conscience. Before we go any further, everyone needs to understand what we're discussing, Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of command he'd never wanted. We have standing orders to extract immediately following the loss of our team leader. Those orders are clear, legal, and by the book. What Lieutenant Winters is proposing violates those orders. So we vote. Democratic. Everyone gets a say, and I'll respect whatever decision we make as a team. Lieutenant David Park stepped forward, his jaw set. At 29, he was the youngest officer present, a Naval Academy graduate who'd grown up believing in the system, in the chain of command, in doing things the right way. Chief, I have to argue against this. We're talking about conducting an unauthorized military operation on foreign soil based on intelligence from an operative who's been declared KIA and off-grid for 3 years. No matter how much we trust Lieutenant Winters personally, we can't verify her intelligence. We can't confirm her claims about a JSOC mole. This could be a setup, or she could be compromised, or... You think I'm lying? Sarah's voice was ice. I think you've been through hell, Park replied carefully. I think 3 years of torture and survival could affect anyone's judgment. I think we need to extract, get you to proper medical and psychological evaluation, and let the intelligence community verify what you found. Then Command can send a proper task force to handle Volkov. By which time Volkov will be gone, Sarah shot back. The mole will warn him, the weapons will be distributed, and in 6 months American soldiers will die from Chinese missiles we could have destroyed today. Park didn't back down, maybe. Or maybe the intelligence community will track him, build a case, and take down his entire network properly. We're 7 operators, 6 now, exhausted, low on ammunition, 40 miles from extraction. We hit a fortified compound with 40 hostiles. We're not coming back. Captain Chen is already dead. How many more coffins do we want to send home? The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Santos shifted uncomfortably, his youthful face troubled. The other SEALs exchanged glances, the doubt spreading like a virus. Morrison felt the weight of command crushing down on him. Park was right about the risks. Park was right about the protocol. Park was probably right about the outcome. But Morrison kept seeing Captain Chen's last moments, kept hearing his final words. Get them home. Did Chen mean just the team? Or did he mean all the soldiers who would die if Volkov's weapons reached the battlefield? Show them, Morrison said quietly to Sarah. Sarah knelt and spread photographs across the ground like tarot cards predicting death. But these weren't abstract predictions. They were documented evidence of catastrophe waiting to happen. Chinese HN-5 surface-to-air missiles, Russian Kornet anti-tank systems, crates marked with chemical weapon symbols, and the worst, detailed shots of a reinforced container with Cyrillic writing and radiation trefoil symbols. This is from a surveillance run I did 4 days ago, Sarah explained, pointing to a photo of the container being unloaded from a truck. That's a Soviet-era Ra-115 suitcase nuke, a tactical nuclear demolition device, yield of approximately 1 kiloton, small by nuclear standards but enough to level several city blocks. The Russians lost track of dozens of these after the USSR collapsed. Volkov has acquired one, and tomorrow at dawn, He's selling it to buyers I've identified as Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps intelligence officers. The silence that followed was absolute. Santos crossed himself. Park's face went pale. Even the most hardened operators stared at the photograph with dawning horror. 1 kiloton in the right location kills tens of thousands, Sarah continued relentlessly. Manhattan, London, Tel Aviv, or a military base. Imagine this detonating at Naval Base Coronado during a training cycle. Thousands of SEALs, their families, support personnel, gone in a flash. That's what we're allowing if we walk away. Jesus Christ, Santos whispered. Park was shaking his head, but his objections had lost their conviction. If this is real, command needs to know. We need to get this intelligence to people who can. Can what? Sarah interrupted. Lieutenant, I've been trying to figure out who the mole is for 8 months. I've narrowed it down to 3 colonels with JSOC access. Any one of them could be Volkov's source. We report this through normal channels. Which one do we trust? How do we know our report doesn't land on the mole's desk? How do we know Volkov doesn't get a warning call 30 minutes after we transmit? Morrison watched his team wrestle with the impossible calculus of modern warfare. In the old days, it was simple. You saw the enemy, you killed the enemy. But now the enemy might be wearing the same uniform, sitting in the same headquarters, saluting the same flag. There's another factor, Morrison added quietly. Captain Chen. He died in that ambush because someone told Volkov we were coming. Someone in our command structure sold us out. Those mercenaries were positioned perfectly, knew our approach route, knew our numbers. That wasn't luck. That was inside information. The implications settled over the team like a shroud. One of their own, or at least someone who should have been one of their own, had sent them into an ambush, had gotten their captain killed. The betrayal cut deeper than any enemy bullet. I say we vote, Morrison declared. But first, everyone needs to understand the stakes. We do this, we're disobeying direct orders. Best case scenario if we survive, court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison time. Worst case, we die in that compound and get buried as rogues who went native. Our families lose our pensions, our benefits, everything. Our reputations get destroyed. The Navy will disavow us to avoid an international incident. He paused, meeting each man's eyes. But if we don't do this, that nuclear device goes to terrorists. Those weapons kill Americans. And whoever betrayed us keeps operating, keeps selling out missions, keeps getting good men killed. So the question isn't whether this is legal or safe or career smart. The question is, what would Captain Chen do? The answer was written on every face. Marcus Chen would never have walked away from this fight, no matter the cost. He taught them that being a SEAL meant more than following orders. It meant doing what was right when no one else could or would. All in favor of the mission, raise your hand, Morrison said. His own hand went up first. Sarah's followed immediately. Then Santos, the youngest, barely old enough to understand what he was sacrificing. The senior operators raised their hands one by one, faces grim but determined. Finally, Lieutenant Park stood alone, the last man without his hand raised. Everyone watched him, waiting. He looked at the photographs again, at the nuclear container that could kill thousands. He looked at Captain Chen's covered body. He looked at Sarah Winters, the woman who'd survived 3 years in hell for the chance at this moment. Park's hand rose slowly, reluctantly, but it rose. God help us all, he muttered. Unanimous, Morrison confirmed. Then we're committed. Lieutenant Winters, you're now the mission advisor. Brief us on everything: terrain, approach routes, compound layout, enemy positions, guard rotations, weapon systems, everything you know. We have 18 hours to plan an operation that conventional wisdom says is impossible. Sarah pulled out a tattered map and began marking positions with a piece of charcoal. The compound is built into the mountainside around an old Soviet mining complex. Natural choke points here, here, and here. 40 mercenaries on a normal day, but Volkov's bringing in reinforcements for the transfer. I estimate 60 by tomorrow morning. Heavy machine guns on the perimeter, at least 2 technical vehicles with mounted weapons, and a BTR-70 armored personnel carrier. "Christ, we're assaulting a fortress," Santos muttered. "We're not assaulting anything," Sarah corrected. "Direct assault is suicide. We're going to use the one advantage we have. They don't know we're coming. Volkov thinks the ambush eliminated you. He thinks I'm still a lone ghost in the mountains. We use that. We make them afraid before we ever fire a shot." Morrison leaned over the map, his tactical mind engaging with the problem. "Psychological warfare first, then infiltration. What did you have in mind?" Sarah's smile was predatory. "I've been haunting these mountains for 8 months, picking off isolated patrols, sabotaging equipment. Volkov's men are already scared of me. They call me the White Death, like I'm some kind of supernatural force. We amplify that fear tonight. I conduct a terror campaign while you infiltrate through the old mining tunnels I've scouted. By dawn, they're panicked and disorganized, and we hit them when they're weakest." "The mining tunnels," Park said, studying the map. "These look unstable." "They are," Sarah admitted. "Cave-ins, toxic gas pockets flooding in sections. But they'll get you inside the compound's perimeter undetected. I've mapped the safe routes." For the next 6 hours, they planned. Sarah sketched the compound's layout from memory, marking guard towers, patrol routes, blind spots, and structural weaknesses. They inventoried their ammunition, enough for maybe one sustained firefight if they were lucky. They redistributed equipment, prepped demolition charges, and memorized rally points and emergency extraction routes. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Morrison pulled Sarah aside while the others prepared gear. "I need to ask you something, and I need the truth," he said quietly. "Are you okay? Mentally, I mean. 3 years alone, tortured, hunted, that breaks people. I need to know if you're stable enough for this." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the mountains that had been her prison and her home. "Honestly, no, I'm not okay. I have nightmares. I don't trust anyone. I've forgotten how to have a normal conversation. Some days the only thing that kept me alive was hatred, pure, burning hatred for Volkov and whoever sold out my team." She met his eyes. "But I'm functional. My shooting is better than ever. My tactical judgment is sound. And tomorrow, I'm going to kill the man who destroyed my life. That's what's keeping me sane right now." It wasn't the answer Morrison wanted, but it was honest. He nodded slowly. "After this is over, if we survive, you're getting help. Real help. That's not a request." "After this is over, I'll probably be in prison," Sarah replied with dark humor. "But sure, Chief, I'll see the Navy shrink." As night fell, the team made final preparations. They buried Captain Chen in a shallow grave marked with stones, a temporary resting place until they could bring him home properly. Each man stood silent for a moment, saying goodbye to the leader who'd shaped them into warriors. Morrison spoke last, kneeling beside the grave. "We're going to finish this, Marcus. We're going to get justice for you and for everyone that bastard has killed. And then we're all coming home together, you, us, and Sarah. That's a promise." The storm clouds gathered again as darkness claimed the mountains. SEAL Team 7 moved out, following Sarah Winters into the heart of enemy territory. Behind them, Captain Chen's grave stood silent witness to the choice they'd made, the choice to follow conscience over orders, justice over safety, and brotherhood over everything else. The easy path would have been extraction and safety. They'd chosen the hard path instead. They'd chosen to become ghosts. The mountains transformed as darkness fell, becoming an alien landscape of shadows and stone. Sarah led the team along paths that didn't exist on any map, game trails, dry riverbeds, crevices between boulders that looked impassable until you were inside them. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd walked these routes 100 times, her feet finding purchase on loose scree that would have sent anyone else tumbling into ravines below. "How the hell did you survive out here?" Santos whispered during a brief halt, his breath coming hard from the brutal pace. Sarah didn't break her scan of the terrain ahead. "You learn or you die. First month I nearly starved. Ate insects, roots, anything I could find. Second month, I learned to hunt with snares. Third month, I started taking supplies from Volkov's patrols. Her voice was matter-of-fact, describing survival like it was a technical manual. By month 6, these mountains felt more like home than any base ever did. Morrison watched her navigate a razor-thin ledge with casual grace and understood what 3 years alone had done to her. Sarah Winters hadn't just survived. She'd evolved into something perfectly adapted to this harsh environment. Part of him wondered if she could ever adapt back to civilization, or if the mountains had claimed her permanently. They moved through a narrow gorge where the walls pressed so close the seals had to turn sideways, packs scraping against stone. The night sky disappeared above them, leaving only claustrophobic darkness and the sound of their breathing. Park's hand trembled slightly on his rifle. He'd always hated confined spaces. "Contact front," Sarah suddenly whispered, freezing the entire column. Morrison eased forward, saw what she'd spotted. 2 mercenaries on patrol, smoking cigarettes beside a campfire in a small clearing ahead. They were speaking Russian, laughing about something, completely unaware they were being watched. Sarah's hand moved to her knife. Morrison gripped her wrist, shook his head. They couldn't afford to alert anyone yet. Bodies would be discovered, and the alarm would be raised before they reached the mining tunnels. Sarah's eyes flashed with frustration, but she nodded. They'd have to bypass. The detour added an hour to their movement, climbing up and around the patrol's position through terrain so steep they needed climbing gear. By the time they regained the trail, everyone was exhausted, fingers raw from gripping rock, legs trembling from the exertion. "Rest," Morrison ordered quietly, 10 minutes. The team collapsed against boulders, pulling out water and energy bars. Morrison found Sarah sitting apart, as she always did, staring back the way they'd come with that perpetual wariness of someone who'd learned that relaxation meant death. He sat beside her, keeping his voice low. "Tell me about Volkov. What kind of man are we facing?" Sarah was silent for a long moment, her jaw working. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight of intimate knowledge born from months of captivity. "Dmitry Volkov, 52 years old, former Spetsnaz officer who saw the USSR collapse and decided loyalty was for fools. Started selling Soviet weapon stockpiles to the highest bidder in the 90s. Built an empire on blood and betrayal." She pulled out a battered photograph, Volkov standing beside a helicopter, a bear of a man with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. "He's smart, paranoid, and absolutely ruthless. Kills anyone who crosses him, but rewards loyalty generously. His men worship him because he pays better than any army and gives them permission to be the monsters they always wanted to be." "And the torture?" Morrison asked quietly. Sarah's hand went unconsciously to a scar on her neck. He didn't do it himself, too important for that, had specialists, but he watched sometimes, asking questions about SEAL tactics, training, capabilities. He was professional about it, almost clinical. That's what made it worse somehow. He wasn't angry or sadistic. He was just extracting information like I was a hard drive to be downloaded. Morrison felt rage building in his chest. "How did you hold out?" "I didn't give him anything real," Sarah replied. "Fed him enough partial truths mixed with misinformation to keep me alive while I looked for escape opportunities. Told him about training exercises from 10 years ago, obsolete tactics, equipment we don't use anymore. Enough to satisfy him without compromising current operations." She looked at Morrison. "But it cost me. Every day I stayed alive by giving him something, even lies, felt like betrayal." "You did what you had to do to survive. No one blames you for that." "I blame me," Sarah said flatly. "Every night in those caves, I wondered if some piece of misinformation I fed him would get someone killed anyway. Wondered if I should have just died with my team instead of." She cut herself off, shaking her head. "Doesn't matter now. Tomorrow I end him." Morrison recognized the dangerous edge in her voice, the single-minded focus of someone who'd reduced their entire existence to one goal. "Sarah, This mission is about stopping the weapons transfer and exposing the mole. Killing Volkov is secondary. For you maybe, she replied. For me, it's everything. Before Morrison could respond, Park hissed a warning. Movement on the ridge above, multiple contacts. The team went silent, melting into shadows. Through night vision, Morrison counted 6 figures moving along the high ground. Another patrol, better armed and more alert than the previous one. They were sweeping the area methodically, as if searching for something. They're looking for me, Sarah whispered. I hit one of their convoys 2 days ago. They've been running extra patrols ever since. The enemy patrol passed within 50 meters, close enough that Morrison could hear their radios crackling. They spoke in tense voices, jumpy and nervous. One mentioned the ghost and made a warding gesture like he was trying to protect himself from evil spirits. After they passed, Morrison understood Sarah's psychological warfare strategy better. These men weren't just afraid of an enemy sniper, they were afraid of something supernatural, something that couldn't be killed or escaped. That fear would be a weapon more powerful than any rifle when the assault began. They reached the mining tunnel entrance 2 hours before dawn. It was hidden behind a rockfall that looked natural, but had been carefully arranged to allow passage for someone who knew where to look. Sarah moved stones aside, revealing a dark opening barely wide enough for a man with a pack. This goes down about 40 feet, then levels out, Sarah explained. Stay close, watch for weak spots in the ceiling, and for God's sake, don't use lights unless absolutely necessary. There are ventilation shafts that connect to the compound sound carries. Morrison studied the black mouth of the tunnel and felt the weight of the mountain pressing down on him already. Everyone check your gear one last time. Once we're inside, there's no turning back. These tunnels are our only way in, and if they collapse behind us, they're our tomb. The SEALs performed final equipment checks with ritualistic precision. Weapons, ammunition, demolition charges, medical supplies, communications gear. Each man mentally prepared himself for what came next, crawling through unstable passages beneath tons of rock, emerging in the heart of an enemy stronghold, and fighting a battle they'd probably never walk away from. Park pulled Morrison aside, his young face drawn and pale. Chief, I need to say something. If this goes wrong, if we don't make it out, tell my parents I died doing something that mattered, not just following orders but actually making a difference. Morrison gripped his shoulder. You tell them yourself when we get home, Lieutenant. That's an order. Sarah was already disappearing into the tunnel, swallowed by darkness. One by one, the SEALs followed her into the earth, leaving behind the open sky and clean air for the claustrophobic hell of the mining complex. Morrison went last, taking one final look at the stars before descending into the black. The tunnel was worse than he'd imagined. The walls pressed close, forcing them to crawl on their bellies through sections where the ceiling had partially collapsed. The air was thick with dust and something chemical that burned their lungs. Water dripped constantly, and strange sounds echoed through the darkness, grinding rock, distant machinery, or perhaps just the mountain settling under its own weight. Santos triggered his flashlight for just a second, revealing walls covered in Cyrillic graffiti from Soviet miners decades ago. Some of it looked like warnings, others were prayers. Light discipline, Morrison hissed, and the darkness returned. They crawled for what felt like hours but was probably 40 minutes, following Sarah's lead through a maze of passages that branched and intersected. Several times, she stopped them, feeling the walls, checking for structural stability before proceeding. Once, she diverted them around a section where methane gas had accumulated, invisible death waiting in the darkness. Finally, Sarah whispered back, "We're here. The maintenance sublevel is 20 feet above us. There's a vertical shaft, then we breach into the compound's lower level. From there, we split up, demolitions team to the weapons depot, assault team to the command center. Everyone remember the plan." Whispered confirmations came back through the darkness. Morrison felt his heart hammering, tasted copper fear on his tongue, and recognized it as the same feeling he got before every mission. The moment before stepping off the helicopter, before breaching the door, before everything became chaos and violence. But this time was different. This time they weren't backed by the full might of the U.S. military. They were alone, unauthorized, operating on intelligence from a woman who'd spent 3 years in hell. If they died here, no one would come for their bodies. No flags would drape their coffins. They'd simply disappear like Sarah had disappeared, becoming ghosts in these mountains. Morrison thought of Captain Chen, buried in those stones 40 miles away, and made a silent promise. "We finish this, Marcus, whatever it costs." "Let's move," he whispered. "Time to become the monsters these bastards fear." They climbed toward the light above, toward Volkov's fortress, toward a reckoning 3 years in the making. Behind them, the tunnels waited in darkness, ready to become either their escape route or their grave. The ghost was leading them home, or to hell. Either way, there was no turning back now. The vertical shaft was a nightmare of rusted metal ladders and crumbling concrete. Sarah ascended first, testing each rung before trusting her weight to it. 20 feet below, Morrison watched her silhouette against the faint light filtering down from above, their first glimpse of Volkov's compound from the inside. Sarah reached the top, pressed her ear against a metal grate, and listened. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Finally, she levered the grate aside with agonizing slowness, metal scraping against stone in a sound that seemed catastrophically loud in the confined space. She pulled herself through and disappeared. Morrison's radio clicked twice, all clear. The team ascended one by one into the maintenance sublevel, a concrete corridor lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow. Somewhere above them, boots thundered on metal stairs, guards changing shifts. "We're inside the compound's eastern section," Sarah whispered, orienting them with hand signals. "Weapons depot is through that door down 2 flights, northwest corner. Command center is upper level, opposite direction. We split here. Park, you've got demolitions. Rig everything to blow on remote detonation, then get back to this position. 30-minute window." Lieutenant Park nodded, his face grim. He took Santos and Rodriguez, the team's explosive specialists. "What about you?" Sarah checked her rifle, her eyes distant and cold. "I'm going hunting. Morrison, give me 20 minutes before you move on the command center. I need to make them afraid first." "Sarah," Morrison began, but she was already moving, flowing through shadows like she'd been born to them. Within seconds, she'd vanished through a service door, leaving only the faint smell of gun oil and mountain air. Morrison led the remaining 3 SEALs toward the command center, moving through the compound's guts, maintenance corridors that the enemy wouldn't be watching. They encountered their first obstacle at a security checkpoint. 2 mercenaries manning a station that controlled access to the upper levels. The guards never saw them coming. Morrison's knife found the first one's throat while his teammate took the second in a synchronized kill that left both men dead before they could raise the alarm. They dragged the bodies into a storage closet, bought themselves maybe an hour before someone noticed the checkpoint unmanned. Above them, the compound was coming alive for the night. Generators rumbled. Vehicles moved in the courtyard. Radio chatter crackled from abandoned posts. Volkov was preparing for tomorrow's transfer, bringing in extra security, positioning his forces. The fortress was becoming even more impregnable. Then Sarah's invisible war began. The first kill happened in the North Watchtower. A guard was scanning the perimeter when something moved in his peripheral vision, just a shadow, nothing more. He turned, bringing his rifle up, but the shadow was already gone. Then pain exploded in his chest. He looked down, saw the knife hilt protruding from his sternum, and collapsed without a sound. Sarah retrieved her blade, lowered the body gently, and placed a small painted stone on his chest, a white ghost symbol that gleamed in the darkness. She disappeared before the second guard noticed his partner was dead. The second guard found the body 2 minutes later and started screaming into his radio. "He's dead. The ghost killed him. She's here. She's inside." Panic spread like wildfire. Guards abandoned outer posts, clustering together in groups, watching every shadow with terrified eyes. They'd heard the stories. The phantom sniper who killed from impossible distances, who survived everything, who couldn't be stopped. Now she was inside their fortress, hunting them. Sarah moved through the compound like death itself, using ventilation shafts, catwalks, and maintenance passages she'd memorized during months of surveillance. She killed a lone sentry in the garage, his neck broken before he knew she was there. Another guard died in the bathroom, garroted while washing his hands. Each body received her ghost stone calling card. The mercenaries started firing at shadows, at sounds, at nothing. Discipline evaporated. These hardened killers, men who'd fought in Chechnya, Syria, Afghanistan, were reduced to frightened children afraid of monsters in the dark. In the command center, Volkov watched security camera feeds with growing rage. His men were falling apart, shooting at ghosts, abandoning positions. "Find her," he roared into the radio. "She's one woman. How can 40 men not find one woman?" But Sarah was never where they looked. She was always 3 steps ahead, always moving, always killing. By the time guards reached a body, she'd already claimed another victim 2 buildings away. She was playing them like an instrument, conducting a symphony of terror. Morrison monitored the chaos through intercepted radio communications. Sarah's psychological warfare was working better than planned. The enemy was disintegrating from within, but something worried him. Sarah's voice on comms had grown colder, more detached. She wasn't just completing a mission anymore. She was enjoying this. "Sarah, check in," Morrison whispered into his radio. Static, then her voice flat and emotionless. "7 down, the night is young." Park's team reached the weapons depot and found it lightly guarded. Most mercenaries had been pulled to hunt for Sarah. They slipped inside and Santos whistled low at what they found. Missiles stacked to the ceiling, crates of ammunition, chemical weapons in reinforced containers, and in the center, isolated and heavily shielded, the nuclear device. "Jesus Christ, this could start World War III, Rodriguez breathed. Park was already placing charges, working with methodical precision. "Rig it all. We're not leaving anything for Volkov to sell." His hands moved quickly, attaching C4 to structural supports, weapons systems, and the nuclear container's cooling systems. "If we can't extract the nuke, we make damn sure no one else can either. Arm everything for remote detonation." Above them, Sarah claimed her 8th victim, a sergeant who'd been organizing search teams. She dropped from an overhead pipe, her knife finding his heart before he could shout. As he died, she whispered in Russian, "For my team. For everyone you helped kill." The compound was in complete chaos now. Mercenaries fired at their own shadows. Officers screamed contradictory orders. Volkov's carefully organized fortress had become a madhouse of paranoia and fear. Morrison's team reached the command center's exterior. Through reinforced windows, he could see Volkov himself, a massive figure barking orders, trying to restore control. And beside him, Morrison's blood froze. 3 civilians in aid worker clothing, hands bound, held at gunpoint. Hostages. Volkov had hostages. "Sarah, we have a problem," Morrison transmitted. "Target has civilians in the command center, 3 non-combatants. This just became a rescue operation." For a long moment, Sarah didn't respond. When she did, her voice carried an edge that made Morrison's skin crawl. "Civilians complicate things. Give me 5 minutes. I'll create a diversion." "Negative, hold position. We need to." The explosion cut him off. Sarah had detonated something in the compound's fuel depot, not enough to cause catastrophic damage, but enough to send flames shooting into the night sky. Every guard in the compound turned toward the blast, including those watching the hostages. "Now," Sarah's voice commanded. "Hit them now while they're distracted." Morrison hesitated. This wasn't the plan. This was chaos, improvisation, the kind of rushed assault that got people killed. But the opening wouldn't last. Volkov's men would recover their discipline soon. "All teams prepare for assault," Morrison ordered. "Park status on demolitions. Charges set, ready to blow on your command." Morrison watched the command center, calculating angles, counting hostiles, measuring the impossible distance between their position and those three innocent people who had no idea they were about to become collateral damage in a war they didn't even know was happening. Then Volkov's voice boomed over external speakers, addressing the entire compound. "Attention, Chief Morrison of SEAL Team 7. I know you're here. I know Sarah Winters is hunting my men, and I know you're planning to assault this building. So let me make you an offer." Morrison's jaw clenched. How did Volkov know his name? The Mole. The JSOC infiltrator had given them up completely. "I have 3 aid workers here," Volkov continued in accented English. "Good people who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'll release them and I'll give you the nuclear device you're so worried about. All I want is safe passage for me and my command staff. And Sarah Winters. She comes to me, surrenders herself, and everyone else walks away alive." The radio erupted with responses from Morrison's team. "It's a trap. He'll kill the hostages anyway. We can still assault." But Sarah's voice cut through them all, calm and final. "Accept it." "What, Sarah? No. It's the only play that saves the civilians, Morrison. You know it, I know it. Volkov gets what he wants me. You get the hostages and the nuke. Everyone wins except me." Her voice softened slightly. "It's okay, Chief. I've been running for 3 years. I'm tired. Let me end this my way." Morrison's mind raced, trying to find another option, another angle. But Sarah was right. Direct assault risked the hostages. Waiting let Volkov's reinforcements arrive. The only variable they could trade was Sarah herself. "There has to be another way," Morrison insisted. Sarah's laugh was bitter. "There isn't, but Morrison, trust me one more time. When I give you the signal, you hit them with everything you have. I didn't survive 3 years in hell to die easy. Winters out." Before Morrison could respond, he saw movement at the compound's main gate. Sarah Winters walked out of the shadows into the open courtyard, hands raised, her rifle slung across her back. Spotlights hit her, turning her into a ghost made solid, gaunt, scarred, but unbroken. Volkov's mercenaries surrounded her, weapons trained from every angle. They stripped her rifle, bound her hands with zip ties, and marched her toward the command center. Morrison watched helplessly through his scope, seeing Sarah walk willingly into the hands of the man who'd tortured her for 8 months. His radio crackled one last time with her voice, barely a whisper. 3 years I've waited for this. When the moment comes, don't hesitate. Promise me." "I promise," Morrison replied, his throat tight. "We're getting you out of there." "Maybe," Sarah said. "Or maybe this is where my war ends. Either way, it ends tonight." She disappeared into the command center, swallowed by the building that held her nightmares. Morrison counted heartbeats, watching windows, waiting for the signal that might never come. Somewhere in that fortress, the ghost was about to face her demon, and Morrison could only watch, wait, and pray that Sarah Winters had one more impossible shot left to make, even without a rifle in her hands. Sarah stood in the command center, surrounded by 8 armed mercenaries, their rifles trained on her with the nervous energy of men who'd watched their comrades die throughout the night. Her hands were zip-tied in front of her, but she stood straight, refusing to show weakness. The room was large, filled with communications equipment, tactical displays, and maps showing Volkov's criminal empire spread across Central Asia. The hostages, 2 women and 1 man, all wearing aid organization vests, huddled in the corner, faces pale with terror. They looked at Sarah with confusion and hope, not understanding who she was or why this mattered. Dmitry Volkov rose from behind his desk, a bear of a man at 6'4" with shoulders like a linebacker. His face was weathered, scarred from old battles, but his eyes held a predator's intelligence. He circled Sarah slowly, savoring the moment like a connoisseur examining a prized acquisition. "Lieutenant Sarah Winters," he said in heavily accented English. "The ghost made flesh. Do you know how much money you've cost me? How many operations you've disrupted? How many good men you've killed?" "Good men?" Sarah's laugh was harsh. "You mean the rapists and murderers who work for whoever pays highest. Don't pretend your mercenaries are soldiers. They're thugs with guns." Volkov's hand flashed out, striking her across the face hard enough to snap her head sideways. Blood trickled from her split lip, but she turned back to him with a smile that was all teeth and defiance. "3 years ago you were so strong," Volkov mused almost sadly. "So proud. I broke you in that cell, made you beg, made you give me secrets, but you escaped, and I've regretted letting you live ever since. You became a ghost story my men tell to scare each other. The unkillable woman, the phantom sniper." "You didn't let me live," Sarah corrected coldly. "I killed 6 of your men and walked out covered in their blood. You didn't grant me anything." Volkov's expression darkened. He gestured to one of his men who brought forward a familiar rifle, Sarah's custom M40A6, the weapon she'd carried through 3 years of survival. Volkov examined it appreciatively. "Beautiful craftsmanship. How many of my men died to this rifle? 20? 30? 47, Sarah replied with grim satisfaction. "I kept count, carved a mark in the stock for each one." While they talked, Sarah's eyes were never still. She cataloged everything: 8 hostiles in the room, their positions, weapon conditions, sight lines. The nuclear device sat in its reinforced container near Volkov's desk. The hostages were 10 feet to her left. 2 exits, main door behind her, emergency exit on the far wall. Structural weak points in the ceiling where Park's demolition charges would collapse the building. Most importantly, she noted Volkov's sidearm, a Makarov pistol on his right hip, held in a leather holster with a worn thumb break. Old habit from his Spetsnaz days, keeping his weapon where he could draw it quickly. That habit was going to kill him. "Your SEAL friends are listening, yes?" Volkov asked, gesturing to the radio equipment. "Monitoring our frequencies." He raised his voice. "Chief Morrison, I know you're out there. I know your plan was to assault this facility, destroy my weapons, steal the nuclear device. But now you have a choice. 3 innocent people die or Sarah surrenders herself to me. What will it be?" Through her earpiece, so small Volkov's men had missed it during their hasty search, Sarah heard Morrison's voice. "Don't do this. We'll find another way." But Sarah knew there was no other way. She'd spent 3 years calculating scenarios, planning contingencies. This was always how it would end, her and Volkov, face to face, one final confrontation. "I want to know something," Sarah said, drawing Volkov's attention back to her. "The JSOC mole, who is it? Who sold out my team 3 years ago?" Volkov smiled, genuinely pleased. "You want to know who betrayed you? Colonel Richard Ashford, your own Special Operations Command. I've paid him $5 million over 3 years. He's given me everything: mission plans, SEAL tactics, targeting information. He even confirmed your team was coming tonight. A very profitable relationship." Sarah's face showed no emotion, but inside, rage burned white-hot. Ashford. She'd met him once, shaken his hand at a military ceremony. He'd looked her in the eye and wished her luck on her deployment, the deployment that would end with her team slaughtered and her in Volkov's torture chamber. "The buyers for the nuclear device," Sarah continued, keeping him talking, keeping him distracted. "Iranian Revolutionary Guard." "Very good," Volkov said, genuinely impressed. "They arrive at dawn. $50 million for one small bomb, enough to rebuild my entire operation. Perhaps I'll expand into Africa next. So many conflicts, so many people desperate for weapons." He moved closer, his ego making him careless. "You've been a worthy opponent, Lieutenant, But this is where your war ends. My men will take you to a proper facility, not the crude cell you escaped from before, somewhere secure. And this time I'll make sure you never leave." Sarah laughed, a genuine chilling sound that made several mercenaries shift nervously. "You think I came here to be captured again? You arrogant fool, I came here to end you." Volkov's smile faded. "You're bound, surrounded, and unarmed. What could you possibly—" Sarah moved. Her hands, zip-tied in front, were already positioned perfectly. She'd been slowly working the plastic restraints against her wrist bone for the last 5 minutes, weakening them. As she dropped into a crouch, the ties snapped. Her boot knife, the one they'd missed because she'd hidden it in a modified heel compartment, was in her hand instantly. The nearest guard died first, his throat opened before he could shout. Sarah used his body as a shield, grabbed his rifle, and fired twice at the lights. The room plunged into darkness broken only by emergency lighting and muzzle flashes. Chaos erupted. Mercenaries fired blindly, hitting their own men in the confusion. Sarah moved like a demon through the darkness, her mountain-trained eyes giving her advantage. Another guard fell, then another. "Now Morrison," she screamed into her mic, "hit them now." Outside, Morrison's team breached the command center from 2 directions. Park detonated charges throughout the compound, not the main demolitions on the weapons depot, but smaller charges designed to create chaos and confusion. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers, turning Volkov's fortress into a killing ground. Sarah fought her way toward the hostages, putting herself between them and the gunfire. A bullet grazed her shoulder, burning pain that she ignored. Another creased her ribs. She returned fire with mechanical precision, each shot finding its target. The door exploded inward. Morrison and his team poured through, their weapons cutting down mercenaries with professional efficiency. The room became a close-quarters battle, brutal and intimate. Sarah saw Rodriguez take a round to the leg but keep fighting. Santos put down 2 guards with a pistol. Through the smoke and chaos, Sarah saw Volkov attempting to escape through the emergency exit. 3 years of hunting, 3 years of survival, 3 years of waiting, and he was trying to run. "No," Sarah snarled. She sprinted after him, her wounded body protesting, her mind focused on a single purpose. She caught him at the door, throwing herself at his legs in a tackle that sent them both crashing to the ground. Volkov was bigger, stronger, trained in Spetsnaz hand-to-hand combat, but Sarah had been forged in 3 years of hell. She had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. They fought like animals, punching, biting, clawing. Volkov's fist caught her jaw, stunning her. He rolled on top, hands reaching for her throat. "Should have killed you when I had the chance," he growled, squeezing. Sarah's vision darkened. Her hands scrabbled for purchase, found the Makarov pistol still on Volkov's hip. She drew it, pressed it against his ribs, and fired 3 times. Volkov's eyes went wide with shock. He toppled sideways, blood spreading across his shirt. Sarah stood over him, the pistol trained on his face, watching him struggle for breath. "Sarah, don't!" Morrison's voice cut through the fog of rage. He stood beside her, weapon ready but not pointed at her. "We need him alive. He has to testify about Ashford, about his network. Don't throw away everything for revenge." Sarah's finger trembled on the trigger. It would be so easy. 1 shot. 3 years of nightmares ended with a single pull. Volkov stared up at her, blood bubbling on his lips, knowing his life was in her hands. For a long moment, Sarah stood frozen between justice and vengeance, between the seal she'd been and the ghost she'd become. The gun barrel never wavered from Volkov's forehead. Then slowly, she lowered the weapon. "Secure him," she said hoarsely. "He lives to face trial." Morrison nodded, respect evident in his eyes. "Santos, Rodriguez, get these hostages out of here. Park, status on the weapons depot." "Charges set and ready, Chief. Say the word and Volkov's entire arsenal becomes a smoking crater." Morrison turned to Sarah, who was swaying on her feet, adrenaline fatting and pain flooding in. "Can you walk?" "I've walked through worse," she replied, but when she took a step, her legs buckled. Morrison caught her, and for the first time in 3 years, Sarah Winters allowed herself to lean on someone else. "I've got you," Morrison said quietly. "Time to go home." Outside, Volkov's compound was in flames. His mercenary force was broken, scattered into the mountains. The nuclear device was secured. The hostages were safe. But as they moved toward the extraction point, Sarah looked back one last time at the fortress that had been her target for so long. It wasn't over yet. Volkov's reinforcements were still coming, and somewhere out there, Colonel Ashford was waiting, unaware that his betrayal had been exposed. The Ghost had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. The command center was a war zone. Bodies lay scattered across the floor, smoke curled from damaged equipment, and the acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. Volkov sat propped against the wall, hands zip-tied, blood soaking through the makeshift bandages Morrison had applied to keep him alive. His face was gray with shock and pain, but his eyes still held defiance. "The hostages are clear," Santos reported, breathing hard. "Moving them to the extraction point now." Morrison checked his watch. "Volkov's reinforcements arrive in 30 minutes. We need to be ghosts before then." He looked at Sarah, who was leaning against the wall, clutching her wounded shoulder. "Can you move?" "I can do whatever needs doing," Sarah replied, though her face was pale and drawn. She'd lost blood-taken hits that would have dropped a lesser operator, but her eyes remained sharp and focused. "The nuclear device, we need to extract it or destroy it. Can't leave it for his buyers." Park appeared in the doorway, his uniform scorched from the demolition work. "Chief, we have a problem. That device weighs over 300 pounds and requires specialized equipment to transport safely. We try to move it wrong. We risk contamination or worse. But if we blow the depot with it inside, we scatter radioactive material across half the valley." Morrison's jaw clenched. They'd planned for many contingencies, but not this. The nuclear device was too dangerous to move, too dangerous to destroy conventionally, and too dangerous to leave behind. "There's a solution," Sarah said quietly. Everyone turned to her. "The old mine shaft beneath the depot. It goes down at least 200 feet into solid rock. We lower the device into the shaft, collapse the entrance with explosives, then bring in a proper disposal team later. It'll be buried and shielded until the professionals can handle it." "That'll take time we don't have," Park objected. "Then we make time," Sarah replied, pushing off the wall despite her injuries. "I've survived 3 years in these mountains. I can buy you 30 minutes. She looked at Morrison. "Get everyone to extraction, the hostages, the wounded, Volkov. I'll hold the compound until you're clear." "Absolutely not," Morrison said flatly. "We don't leave people behind." "You're not leaving me. I'm staying by choice." Sarah moved to the weapons rack, selected a fresh rifle and ammunition. "Morrison, be smart. You've got wounded operators, 3 civilians who can barely walk, and a prisoner who needs immediate medical attention. You try to fight your way out with all that, people die. But if I create a diversion, draw Volkov's reinforcements away from your extraction route, everyone makes it home." Rodriguez, binding his wounded leg, spoke up. "She's right, Chief. We're moving too slow with the wounded. We need someone to buy time." Morrison wanted to argue, but Sarah was already checking her rifle with mechanical efficiency, her movements those of a woman who'd made peace with what came next. He recognized the look. He'd seen it on operators who volunteered for suicide missions, who accepted death as the price of mission success. "How do we extract you after?" Morrison demanded. Sarah smiled, tired and sad. "Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but those hostages get home to their families. Your team survives. Volkov faces justice. That's what matters." She met his eyes. "Captain Chen died protecting Santos. I'm just following his example." The radio crackled with urgent chatter. Volkov's reinforcements were approaching faster than expected, 20 minutes out instead of 30. 3 technical vehicles with heavy weapons and at least 40 fresh mercenaries. "Decision time, Chief," Park said quietly. Morrison looked at his team, wounded, exhausted, but alive. Looked at Sarah, already positioning herself by the window, scanning approach routes. 3 years ago, they'd left her behind because they thought she was dead. Now she was asking them to do it again, but this time knowingly, deliberately. "I need your word," Morrison said finally. "You hold them for 20 minutes, then you break contact and move to secondary extraction point. We'll have a helicopter waiting. You don't get to die here, Sarah. That's an order." "I'll do my best," Sarah replied, which wasn't the promise he wanted but was the only one she'd give. Morrison moved to her, gripped her good shoulder. 20 minutes, then you run. We've already lost Chen. I'm not writing another KIA report for you." Sarah nodded, though both of them knew the odds of her surviving what came next were nearly zero. The compound was surrounded, reinforcements closing in, and she was wounded, low on ammunition and alone. "Get the device to the mine shaft," Morrison ordered Park. "Rig it for burial. Santos, Rodriguez, escort the hostages to extraction. I'll take Volkov. Everyone moves fast and quiet. Sarah gives us our window, we don't waste it." The team moved with urgent efficiency. Park and his demolition specialists began the dangerous work of relocating the nuclear device. Santos helped the hostages toward the exit, their faces showing gratitude and confusion about why one soldier was staying behind. Morrison hauled Volkov to his feet, ignoring the Russian's grunt of pain. "Your empire ends tonight. Your buyers get nothing, and Ashford goes down with you." Volkov smiled through bloody teeth. "You think one traitor will matter? There are always more. People who will sell anything for the right price. You can't stop that." "Maybe not," Morrison replied, "but we can stop you, and that's enough for today." He dragged Volkov toward the exit, pausing at the doorway to look back at Sarah. She'd positioned herself at a window overlooking the compound's main approach, her rifle resting on the sill. In the growing dawn light, she looked like a statue carved from stone and determination. 20 minutes, Lieutenant," Morrison said. "Then you come home." Sarah didn't turn around. "See you on the other side, Chief." Morrison left, knowing he might never see her alive again. The team scattered into the pre-dawn darkness, moving toward safety while Sarah Winters prepared to make her final stand. She watched through her scope as Morrison's team disappeared into the rocks, watched the nuclear device being carefully lowered into the mine shaft, watched the hostages stumbling toward freedom, supported by operators who should have been her enemies but had become her brothers. Then she saw the headlights. Volkov's reinforcements, 3 vehicles racing up the mountain road, bristling with weapons and angry men who'd heard their commander had been captured. Sarah settled into her shooting position, controlled her breathing, and centered her scope on the lead vehicle's driver. Her shoulder throbbed, her ribs screamed with every breath, and exhaustion pulled at her like gravity. But her hands were steady. 3 years I've waited," she whispered to herself. 3 years of hell, but I got them home. I got them all home. The vehicles came into range. Sarah's finger found the trigger, and she smiled, a genuine expression of peace that hadn't touched her face in 1,000 days. She'd been a ghost for so long. Maybe it was time to finally rest. But not yet. Not until her brothers were safe. Not until Morrison was clear. Not until every single one of those hostages was on a helicopter heading home. Sarah Winters had survived torture, escape, and 3 years alone in hostile mountains. She could survive 20 more minutes. She had to. The first shot echoed across the valley like thunder, and the final battle began. The ghost was making her stand, and heaven help anyone who stood in her way. Outside the compound, Morrison heard the gunfire start, single shots, precise and deliberate, Sarah's signature style. Each shot meant one less enemy, One more second bought with blood and skill. "Move faster," he urged his team, knowing every second Sarah bought them came at terrible cost. They ran through the darkness, the wounded leaning on the healthy, Volkov stumbling between them, the nuclear device secure in its stone tomb. Behind them, Sarah's rifle sang its deadly song, and Morrison prayed to every god he could name that when the sun rose, the ghost would still be alive to see it. 20 minutes, just 20 minutes. It might as well have been forever. Sarah's rifle cracked again and again, each shot a metronome counting down the seconds. The lead technical vehicle swerved violently as its driver slumped forward, dead before he knew what hit him. The vehicle careened off the mountain road, tumbling into a ravine in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The other two vehicles scattered, mercenaries pouring out and taking cover. They returned fire blindly, spraying the compound with automatic weapons. Bullets chewed through walls around Sarah, but she'd already moved to a new position, firing from a different window. Another mercenary fell, then another. "Where is she?" voices shouted in Russian. "Find the sniper." But Sarah was everywhere and nowhere, a phantom moving through the burning compound. She'd memorized every room, every angle, every firing position during her months of surveillance. The mercenaries were hunting a ghost that refused to be caught. Her earpiece crackled, Morrison's voice tight with tension. "Sarah, status." "Holding," she replied between shots. "How long until extraction?" 15 minutes. The nuclear device is secured. Hostages are at the landing zone. Can you make it?" Sarah glanced at her ammunition. 3 magazines left. Looked at the blood soaking through her makeshift bandages. Counted at least 30 hostiles still approaching, angry and coordinated. "I'll make it," she lied. Another position change. Another shot. A mercenary's radio operator went down, cutting their communications. Sarah smiled grimly. Without coordination, they were just an angry mob. But there were so many of them. A burst of automatic fire found her, bullets punching through the wall inches from her head. Concrete dust filled her lungs. She rolled, came up firing, dropped 2 more targets. Her shoulder wound reopened, fresh blood flowing warm down her arm. 10 minutes. The compound was collapsing around her. Fires from Park's demolitions had spread, filling rooms with choking smoke. The ceiling groaned ominously where support beams had been damaged. Sarah moved through the inferno like a demon, her ammunition dwindling, her body failing, but her purpose unwavering. She thought of her team, the one she'd lost 3 years ago and the one she'd saved tonight. Thought of Captain Chen, who'd taught her that honor meant sacrifice. Thought of Morrison and his promise to get everyone home. Everyone except her, maybe, and that was okay. 5 minutes. Her rifle clicked empty. Last magazine. Sarah slammed it home, chambered a round, and took position in what remained of the command center. Through the smoke and flames, she could see mercenaries massing for a final assault. They'd figured out she was alone, wounded, nearly out of ammunition. They were coming to finish this. Sarah braced her rifle against rubble, sighted on the doorway, and waited. Her hands didn't shake. 3 years of hell had burned away everything except the core of who she was, a warrior who protected her own, no matter the cost. The mercenaries charged. Sarah's rifle spoke one last time, controlled bursts, each one dropping an enemy. They kept coming, scrambling over their dead. Her magazine ran dry. She dropped the rifle, drew her pistol, kept firing. The slide locked back empty. They were in the room now, 5 of them, weapons raised. Sarah stood, bleeding and defiant, knowing this was the end. She'd bought 20 minutes. Her team was safe. It was enough. Then the world exploded. Apache gunships screamed over the compound, their chain guns ripping through the remaining mercenaries like a scythe through wheat. The 5 men threatening Sarah disintegrated in a hail of 30 rounds. Reinforcements from every direction were cut down before they could react. Morrison's voice burst through her earpiece. I told you, we don't leave anyone behind. Extract bird is inbound 60 seconds. Sarah stumbled through the flames toward the compound's courtyard. Her legs barely held her. The world swam in and out of focus, but through the smoke she saw it. A Black Hawk helicopter descending, Morrison standing in the door reaching out. She ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around her from the few surviving mercenaries. The helicopter's door gunners returned fire, covering her approach. Sarah's hand found Morrison's, and he hauled her aboard with strength born of desperation. "Go, go, go," Morrison shouted to the pilots. The Black Hawk lifted off as the compound exploded behind them, Park's main charges finally detonating, destroying Volkov's weapons stockpile in a fireball that lit up the dawn sky. Sarah collapsed onto the helicopter floor, Morrison's hands pressing bandages against her wounds. "You said 20 minutes, Morrison said, his voice rough. "You gave us 30, couldn't follow a simple order." Sarah laughed, which turned into a cough that brought up blood. "Never was good at following orders, Chief." The team surrounded her, Santos checking her vitals, Rodriguez securing her wounds, Park monitoring radio traffic. The hostages stared at her with awe and gratitude. And in the corner, zip-tied and defeated, Volkov watched the woman who'd destroyed his empire. "It's over," Morrison said quietly. "You did it, Sarah. It's finally over." Sarah's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion and blood loss pulling her under, but she was smiling. For the first time in 3 years, she felt safe. Her war was done. 6 months later, Arlington National Cemetery gleamed in autumn sunlight. Sarah stood before Captain Marcus Chen's grave, her dress uniform crisp and pressed, medals heavy on her chest. The scars were still there, some visible, most not, but she stood straight and proud. Morrison approached, now wearing commander's insignia. "The team's waiting. New mission brief in an hour, you coming?" The aftermath had been brutal, debriefings, medical treatments, psychological evaluations. Volkov had testified, bringing down Colonel Ashford and exposing a corruption network that reached deep into military intelligence. Ashford was serving life in prison. Volkov's empire was shattered. Sarah had faced her own reckoning, months of therapy, working through trauma that would never fully heal. The nightmares were less frequent now, though they still came. She'd learned to trust again, slowly, carefully. The Navy had offered her a choice: medical retirement with full honors or return to active duty. Most people expected her to take the retirement, to disappear into civilian life and try to forget. Sarah had chosen to stay, because being a SEAL wasn't just what she did, it was who she was. "Tell me about the mission," she said. Morrison's smile was knowing. Hostage rescue in Somalia, high risk, low probability of success, exactly the kind of thing we specialize in. Sarah touched Chen's headstone one last time, remembering the man who taught her that courage meant doing what was right, even when it cost everything. "Let's go to work, Commander." They walked together through the cemetery, two warriors who'd seen hell and survived. Behind them, Chen's grave stood silent, honored, remembered. At the training facility, Sarah found her team waiting, a new generation of operators who'd heard the stories of the ghost sniper who'd survived 3 years behind enemy lines. They looked at her with a mixture of awe and nervousness. "Lieutenant Winters will be teaching advanced sniper tactics," Morrison announced. "Pay attention. She's forgotten more about long-range shooting than most of you will ever learn." Sarah set her rifle case on the table and opened it. Inside, her custom M40A6, cleaned and maintained to perfection. And beside it, a small painted stone, white ghost symbol gleaming in the light. A young operator raised his hand. "Ma'am, is it true you made a 1,200-meter shot in a thunderstorm to save SEAL Team 7? Sarah smiled, remembering that night, the storm, the impossible shot, the moment everything changed. "It's true, but that's not the lesson." "What is the lesson, ma'am?" Sarah looked at her team, these warriors who would face their own impossible moments, their own mountains to survive. The lesson is this: you never quit. Not when it's hard, not when it hurts, not when everyone thinks you're dead. You find a way to keep fighting, keep surviving, keep protecting the people who matter. That's what makes you a SEAL. She lifted her rifle, feeling its familiar weight, and for the first time in years felt complete. The ghost had finally come home. "Now," Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd earned every word through blood and survival, "let me teach you how to make impossible shots. Because in this job, impossible is just Tuesday." The operators leaned forward, eager to learn from the legend. Morrison watched from the doorway, proud of the woman who'd walked through hell and emerged stronger. Outside, the sun climbed higher, burning away morning mist. Somewhere in the world, enemies plotted. Hostages waited for rescue. Battles waited to be fought. But in this moment, in this room, Sarah Winters was exactly where she belonged, teaching the next generation, passing on the lessons bought with pain and perseverance, ensuring that no operator would ever face the darkness alone like she had. The ghost had become a guardian. The nightmare had become a mentor. The survivor had become a symbol of everything that made the SEALs legendary: courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable will to bring everyone home. Sarah's war was over, but her mission, protecting her brothers, saving the innocent, standing against evil no matter the cost, would never end. And she wouldn't have it any other way.